მოგესალმებით მეგობრებო, მთიანი ყარაბაღის კონფლიქტი პოსტსაბჭოთა სივრცეში ყველაზე ძველი და სახიფათო კონფლიქტიაო, აცხადებს კავკასიის ცნობილი ბრიტანელი მკვლევარი თომას და ვაალი. 2020 წლის 10 ნოემბერს სომხეთმა და აზერბაიჯანმა ამ მრავალწლიანი კონფლიქტის კიდევ ერთი თავი ჩახურეს. მძიმე ადამიანური მსხვერპლის ფასად ბაქომ ამჯერად გამარჯვება იზეიმა. სომხეთის რესპუბლიკის შეარაღებულ ძალებს რეგიონის დატოვება მოუწიათ და მთიან ყარაბაღში რუსი მშვიდობის ყოფილები ჩადგნენ. რა ვითარება რეგიონში ომიდან 1 წლის შემდეგ? კვლავ განახლდება თუ არა მხარეებს შორის სამხედრო დაპირისპირება და როგორია კონფლიქტის გადაწყვეტის პერსპექტივა? დღეს სასაუბროთ სწორედ თომას და ვაალი მოვიწვიეთ. თომასი საერთაშორისო კვლევითი ცენტრი კარნეგის ევროპის ფილიალის უფროსი მკვლევარია და ავტორია წიგნისა შავი ბაღი, სომხეთი და აზერბაიჯანი მშვიდობასა და ომს შორის. Thomas, thanks for joining us.
Ძალიან სასიამოვნოა.
Almost a year has passed since Moscow brokered a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, putting a stop to what was already a full-blown war that had lasted for 44 days. But since we've seen Baku and Yerevan trading accusations for ceasefire violations, and this year we also witnessed a clash, I believe, Armenia-Azerbaijan border. On the whole, how do you think did the ceasefire agreement achieve its short-term goal of halting bloodshed, or yet another flare-up is in the offing?
Yes, thank you, Georgi, and good to be with you. Yeah, I think the key thing to be said here is that the agreement signed on November 9th, 10th last year was a ceasefire agreement. It wasn't a peace agreement. It was a ceasefire agreement to stop the fighting. And it largely succeeded in that aim of being a ceasefire. There have been some episodes of violence, but they've been much smaller than during the 44-day war. There have been a few casualties on the Armenia-Azerbaijan border, as you say. But basically, there has been a ceasefire. Russia has put peacekeepers on the ground, about 2,000 peacekeepers. And basically, the lines that were drawn by that conflict have been frozen. But we're still a very, very long way from a peace agreement. I don't think that the ceasefire agreement will break down dramatically, but we also have a ticking clock. We have the fact that the Russian peacekeeping mission has a 5-year limit. It ends in November 2025, 6 months before it is due to expire. Any of the three sides of the November agreement, and we presume that would be Azerbaijan, has the right to veto a further extension of the Russian mission. Right. So we're facing a kind of deadline of 2025 when Azerbaijan might try to end this Russian mission for various reasons, and then we would be facing a very uncertain picture and possibly some kind of return to some kind of conflict, possibly.
Right. Now, many observers note that the 2020 war episode in the long-running history of Armenia-Azerbaijan enmity stands out not only because Azerbaijan finally gained the upper hand, but also we've seen an increased and often direct engagement by third parties to the conflict, mainly regional players. How did the geopolitical map change in the region in the aftermath of the 2020 war, and who gained most from this change?
Well, certainly both Russia and Turkey asserted themselves in this war. Turkey by its strong military support for Azerbaijan, the fact that now Turkey is really in on the ground with its, it's also signed a further agreement with Azerbaijan last June, the so-called Shusha Declaration. And obviously Russia returned to this region much more strongly because of its establishing the peacekeeping force. And both Russia and Turkey stand to benefit from the ninth point of the ceasefire agreement, which is about unblocking communication, so that possibly railway lines will be rebuilt through Azerbaijan into Armenia, around to Iran and Turkey, bypassing Georgia, by the way, so it's not such good news for Georgia. So certainly Russia and Turkey more assertive, and I think the loser hard to say who the winner is, but the loser is certainly the Western institutions, the OSCE, Minsk Group, which was marginalized, and Western influence over both Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Right. You just mentioned the Minsk Group, the Minsk process, and we know that attempts to resolve this conflict can be traced back to the 1990s and the OSCE Minsk Group, the chief venue for negotiations, I think mainly focused on reaching a political solution, settling the status of Nagorno-Karabakh. But last year's war, obviously Azerbaijan emerged victorious, and I think this fundamentally alters the calculus for peacemaking as well. So how do you think, should the international community essentially trade the same path? Or should this status question take a backseat to other issues, conflict transformation, for instance, through economic cooperation and trust building between the societies?
Well, certainly the problem, at the heart of this dispute is the status of the Armenians of Karabakh. This was the problem back in early 20th century, 1905, 1918, 1921. This was the problem. This is the problem that resurfaced in 1988 with the Karabakh Armenian movement and Azerbaijan's attempts to stop that movement. And then, for sure, the Minsk Group tried for more than almost 3 decades to try and resolve this problem, which is almost unsolvable. And of course, Azerbaijan now has the upper hand. No one, I think, is talking anymore about the independence or secession of Karabakh. The question really is...
It's off the table.
It's off the table, really. I think the question then is what kind of territorial autonomy the Karabakh Armenians might win. Azerbaijan says that's no longer a question, but clearly it's a question which is very much there for the Armenian side. So sure, it's not going to be solved soon, and it makes a lot of sense to work on other issues, to work on economic connectivity, unblocking transport routes, and so on. The trouble is Azerbaijan got such a dominant position in the 2020 war as it doesn't seem to be in a very generous mood. They're squeezing the Armenians on many issues, on issues of borders, issues of detainees, in particular the issue of a possible corridor, well, a planned corridor between Azerbaijan, the main part of Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan. So
right.
There's not much of a mood for normalization and reconciliation at the moment, and without that, it will be almost impossible to get back to the core issue of the dispute. Basically, we're still a very long way from an Armenia-Azerbaijan peace agreement.
Right, and last question, infused perhaps with a little wishful thinking. You've been observing our region for, I believe, 3 decades. So do you think that full normalization of relations between Baku and Yerevan is anywhere in sight?
Not at the moment, unfortunately. I mean, one day, surely it will happen. And, maybe that will be a little sooner than we think, but not certainly. I think it's very difficult to foresee it happening in the next few years. We have this issue of the 2025 expiration of the Russian peacekeepers. We still have very high levels of animosity, unfortunately now in the younger generation as well, unfortunately fanned now by social media and so on. So I think it will take several years, I think, of stabilization before we can begin to talk about that. But one thing I think it's worth mentioning is that the prospect of Turkey-Armenian normalization is more real, maybe within the next 5 years. And maybe that could be the first stepping stone towards Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization.
All right, we'll wrap it up here. Thomas de Waal, thank you.